Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are going to talk about a slew of albums that I did not previously have the chance to talk about in the month of June 2023. Albums that are really cool, or really silly, or really important, or really interesting, but they just kind of fell under the radar, I forgot about them, or maybe I didn't care enough to do a full album review. Whatever. We're talking about all that stuff right here, right now, today. Let's get to it. Let's not waste any time. It's 1,000 degrees in here. Holy shit. First up, we have a surprise EP from American nu metal and alternative metal juggernauts Slipknot entitled Adderall. This is a weird EP for a number of reasons. Adderall was one of the more divisive and controversial tracks from their previous studio album, and this features a bunch of alternate versions of that one song. Like, there's one version that's kind of a rough demo, there's another one that doesn't have the massive introduction that the full song on the album had. There's also a totally instrumental version, and on top of that, there are a bunch of other kind of trancey, hypnotic, instrumental numbers that are very heavy on atmosphere. This definitely feels like something that was engineered in a lab to infuriate and bore the people who have hated these more experimental endeavors from Slipknot. And even I myself, as someone who has genuinely enjoyed these experimental endeavors, I can't help but wonder, what was the point of this? The whole thing just ends up feeling really, really, really unnecessary to me. This was just not even really a boring experience, just a total nothing burger of an experience. You could just listen to the original Adderall song 3 or 4 times and then listen to some random, ambient playlist on Spotify and have pretty much the same fucking experience. There's really no need to check this out whatsoever. Next up, we have Dab City from Bongzilla. And of all the stoner metals that I've listened to so far in 2023, I gotta say, this is definitely one of them. Yeah. I've never really been a huge fan of Bongzilla, and this didn't really do anything to change my mind. It's a bunch of fuzzed out, overly distorted, incomprehensible Black Sabbath worship with some awful mixing and some awful vocals. The songs are kind of long and they kind of jump around, and it doesn't really have much momentum or clarity to it. It's Bongzilla doing what Bongzilla do, and if people like that, good for them. I remember getting a lot of flack for talking shit about their previous studio album as well. But yeah, I don't give a shit. I specifically remember people were saying, oh, well, you have to listen to it stoned. That's why you didn't get it, which is such a pointless, silly, arbitrary thing to say. The genre is literally called stoner metal. I think it kind of goes without saying that you're expected to get at least semi-stoned. Of fucking course. But hey, if you love Bongzilla, you're gonna love this too. Good for you. Whatevs. I don't know. Next up, we have Born Under a Mad Sign from Japanese doom and sludge metal crew Church of Misery. I got quite a few requests to review this one, didn't end up doing it. Kinda wish I had, because this thing's pretty cool. I love how dirty and abrasive and in your face the record is. It has a lot of big, fun, catchy grooves and hooks, some great, tasty, almost bluesy guitar licks. I like the album's almost disturbing obsession with, serial killers and, how they enacted out their crimes. It just makes these songs, all the more punishing and powerful. Very cool stuff in my opinion. I wasn't really familiar with a lot of Church of Misery stuff beforehand. That is definitely going to change after having heard this thing. It's a really cool album. Check it out if you haven't already. Next up, we have the Poison Chalice from long-running Dutch death metal, thrash metal crew Legion of the Damned. I don't really have a ton to say about this thing, to be honest. It's Legion of the Damned kind of doing what they've always done, for better or for worse. It's clean, it's punchy, it's nasty, it's straight to the fucking point, it's got big riffs and big beats, it's very meat and potatoes, very straightforward, very generic. It's good old greasy metal fun, but ultimately a supremely inessential listen, in my opinion, unless you are a die-hard Legion of the Damned fan. And for the life of me, I can very honestly say I've never met or encountered one. So, yeah. I don't know. Check it out for shits and giggles, but no harm done if you don't, honestly. Next up, we have a self-titled EP from Glass Casket. This is their first release of any kind in nearly 17 years. For the life of me, I have no clue why it took them so long to release something, but whatevs, not my business, c'est la vie. I would call them a technical deathcore, mathcore kind of band. They feature some heavy hitters from the realms of prog metal and heavy metal. For instance, guitarist Wes Houch, best known for his work with Alluvial, Devin Townsend. He's also worked with The Faceless, Black Crown Initiate, and Thy Art Is Murder in the past. We also have guitarist Dusty Waring from Between the Buried and Me on this thing. As talented as these guys are, in my opinion, the EP is just a little underdeveloped. It feels a little underdone. Like, there are a lot of jagged edges and a lot of weird movements and patterns, and a lot of it doesn't really line up quite right. I think they're trying to just create, like, something really erratic and uncomfortable, like, in the vein of, like, Red Chord-esque deathcore, but with that mathcore edge. Like if the Red Chord and very early Dillinger Escape Plan got together. But I don't know, it just doesn't really come together for me. There are bright spots, though. The vocal work on this thing, for instance, is rabid and intense. I like the production. I like the kind of dirty, claustrophobic feel. Not a perfect EP, but the good news is there's a lot of room to continue expanding and growing for another EP or potentially even a full-blown studio album. So, yeah, not in love with this thing, but I will stay optimistic for more Glass Casket in the future, because there is, warts and all, some cool stuff here. Next up, we have Ghosts from the Past from Norwegian avant-garde and progressive metal crew Vulture Industries. I kind of wanted to review this album, to be honest, but when the opportunity came, I was in Niagara Falls on vacation with my wife, so, you know, that kind of took priority. It's for the best, though, because at the time I hadn't really spent enough time with the album to really give, like, any real insight or commentary on it. And honestly, even now, I feel like I need to have spent more time with it before I give you any real insight or commentary. What I can tell you is, based on what I have heard and based on what I have dissected, Vulture Industries is really cool, and they need more attention. I like how horns are utilized across the record. I like a lot of the progressions. I like how it can also be kind of kooky and kind of silly sometimes. And I also really like the more simplistic approach to vocals. Like, they can be really epic, but they can also be very simplistic. Like, there's no over-the-top falsettos or gutturals here. It's a pretty straightforward, almost kind of talk-singing approach, which I kind of enjoy. Yeah, I like it. I think I need to spend more time with it before I can say that I maybe love it. But I do really like it, and I look forward to spending more time with this record, so I would highly recommend you also check this out, if you have not already. Next up, we have Snow Business from Persekutor, and I have mixed feelings on this one. Sometimes it's really cool, like it sports a lot of, like, old school, hard rock, heavy metal influences and flavors, like twin guitar leads and soaring riffs and solos and some chunky, battering kind of 80s metal rhythms and barrages. But it also has like a really thin, kind of like raw amateur sound mix, and I'm not really digging the blackened component of this thing either. It's just kind of like very basic black metal grunting, the kind you'd hear on any kind of like underground metal release, like in the mid to late 80s. It gets genuinely goofy on a song like Suck City, which is just kind of slow paced, and I don't know, it just ends up sounding almost like a Dungeon Wolf song in my opinion. I mean, nowhere near as incompetent, and also like Dungeon Wolf filtered through something like maybe, I don't know, Venom meets Saxon, I guess, but you know, you get the idea. Yeah, I can't really say I'm consistently a fan of this, but, you know, there were some riffs and some vibes that I was ever so briefly enjoying. I guess if you're in the mood for some more primitive kind of blackened retro heavy metal, this'll do the trick, and honestly, more power to you if that's the case. Next up, we have Blossom, the sophomore studio album from this American mathcore, metalcore crew, Pupil Slicer. A lot of people were really digging their debut, Mirrors, back in 2021. I liked it as well. I think this is a stronger record, though, from start to finish. It's tighter, it's angrier, it's meaner. It's also cleaner and more expansive and more refined. Some really fantastic vocal work, like some bloodthirsty screams and shouts, sometimes contrasted with some more like melancholic, clean vocal sections and dynamics as well. The riffs are consistently so sharp and so angular, delivered with surgical precision and uncompromising brutality. A lot of eerier, moodier textures and elements as well. I would say this record has a more atmospheric and immersive vibe to it than Mirrors. Just a really great mathcore record from start to finish. Honestly, maybe one of the best mathcore records I've heard in a while. Like, I feel like it's been some time since I heard something from this genre that was this urgent and this powerful. Yeah, keep it up, Pupil Slicer, because at this rate, not only am I going to review your next album, but I got a funny feeling your next album, that could end up being album of the year territory. Like, the way y'all keep growing, the way y'all keep getting better and better, unfucking real. Yeah, it goes without saying, y'all need to check this out. It's fucking great. Had I reviewed this, which I did genuinely consider, we'd be looking at a strong 4 to 5, leaning towards a 4.5 to 5. Next up, we have Negative Energy from VEXED, and I'm not a fan. I'm just gonna cut straight to the chase on this one, because I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I appreciate the band's honesty in tackling such dark, mature, and personal subject matter, encompassing everything from childhood trauma to abuse and PTSD and panic attacks and the fear of the unknown. And, it's a very introspective record for the band and cool, great, good for them. But musically, this is such a cookie cutter nu metal, metalcore borefest for me. Same breakdowns, the same squealing guitar tones, the same overusage of kill switch I've heard from so much other, like, derivative, D-tier nu metal and metalcore over the course of the past decade or so, and I'm not feeling it at all, not one bit. There are some bouncy grooves and some more technical parts here and there that kind of wake me up ever so briefly, but yeah, overall, I'm not a fan, not feeling this. Personally, would not recommend, unless you were just really into that kind of, like, nu metal, metalcore sound. In which case, go nuts, I suppose. Next up, we have a self-titled album from Memorage. Memorage feels closer. I'm gonna go with that. Wasn't really in the mood for more nu metal after the aforementioned Negative Energy from VEXED, but I gotta say, this kind of hit a sweet spot. Like, this kind of brought me back to, like, listening to nu metal back when I was, like, a fucking kid. Like, back when I was, like, 9 or 10 years old. Very authentic, gritty, frenzied, crazed, like, old school nu metal with, like, turntables and weird samples and electronic drums and a lot of, like, crushing, unrelenting grooves. It reminds me a lot of those first two albums from Slipknot, but also, there are some, like, electronic and industrial elements that bring to mind, like, Fear Factory and Marilyn Manson of the time, and to some extent you could find on, like, a Code Orange record today. It has so much rage, too. Like, it never slows down. Like, the closest thing you get to a break, a breath of fresh air is maybe these, like, quieter, moodier moments, or, like, these moments where they're kind of, like, just setting up the next blast of explosive, old-school nu metal carnage. Yeah, I ended up honestly kind of liking this thing, honestly. I feel like this, along with the most recent Tala record, this shows me what the nu metal revival is capable of. And this kind of stuff is what's making me excited for this genre's, I guess, inevitable return at this point. The nu metal revival has been talked about for ages, but it feels like now we're finally really in the midst of it. And if that means more Memorage, whatever, then I'm game. I'm good. Let's go. Next up, we have Monokrator from The Bleeding, giving us a high-octane dose of extreme, violent thrash metal, and I'm all for it. This thing was just tons of bloody, stupid, gory, campy fun. The Bleeding are by no means reinventing the extreme thrash metal wheel with this one, but they are making sure that the extreme thrash metal wheel moves at the speed of fucking light. They want that shit to be able to outrun Usain Bolt and The Flash and Sonic the Hedgehog and Speedy Gonzales all fucking put together. Tons of great riffs. Love those squealing, sinister vocals. I love how the production is pretty clean and pretty polished, but it still like doesn't compromise any of the grit or punch or muscle. I also love how the album wastes no fucking time. No fat, no filler, no duds, no needless experimentation or wandering. It just kind of does its thing in like 30 fucking minutes, and then it fucks off, and then it goes home. Proud of itself. Patting itself quite viciously on the back. Definitely wouldn't change your mind if you didn't already love thrash metal, but if you do, there's no doubt in my mind. Definitely wouldn't change your mind if you didn't already love thrash metal, but if you do, no doubt in my mind whatsoever, you're gonna be fucking elated with this thing. And finally, this brings us to Determined to Strike from Sarmat, which a couple of you sent me insisting that I check it out, that I needed to check it out, that my life depended on checking out this album, and I totally understand why y'all said that, because holy shit. This album's fucking weird, man. Like, totally absurd, over-the-top, like, technical, avant-garde death metal, like, equal parts Artificial Brain, Imperial Triumphant, and Gore Guts, with, like, free-flowing jazz influence and some really brutal vocals and instrumentation, trumpets, and, of course, you know, production and mixing and mastering provided by fucking Colin Marston, because of fucking course. The crazy thing is, too, is that it starts off at its most accessible and comprehensible. As the album goes on, it gets way more complex, way more insane, way more mind-blowingly, almost impossibly technical. Like, this thing very easily gives the aforementioned Artificial Brain and Imperial Triumphant and Gore Guts a run for their fucking money if we're looking strictly at the technicality and the complexity of the music and the way that it's been arranged and composed. Hell, I'd even go as far as to say that it gives 2021's Imperative Imperceptible Impulse from Ad Nauseam a run for its money at times. I think the difference is what this thing has in technicality, it lacks somewhat in substance. Like when we talked about Imperative Imperceptible Impulse back in 2021, we didn't just talk about how technical it was. We talked about the mood and the atmosphere and the environment that it created, that it existed in at that time, and kind of still exist in today. Like, Ad Nauseam went out of their way to create something really dark and really unsettling, and, like, they made that record from the ground up, from scratch, like, everything from their instruments to, like, equipment that they use behind the scenes. And it gave it such a uniquely organic and immersive feel. Even when we look at records from the aforementioned Gore Guts, Artificial Brain, and Imperial Triumphant, we talk about, like, their unique sounds and their unique ideas and concepts and how they utilize all of that. And honestly, I don't think the songs are as memorable. Like, once you scrape away how absurdly technical and complex it is, you're not left with as much as you would be if you were to do this, again, with a Gore Guts or with an Imperial Triumphant record. That's not to say I didn't enjoy this record, because I very much did. But I would have enjoyed it more if it also had, like, way more unique things to say and offer. I would have enjoyed it more if it was doing more of its own thing, as opposed to kind of borrowing elements from all of these bands we've mentioned. And voila, there we go! Those are all the albums I feel I missed in the month of June 2023, but as per the norm, it hardly even scratches the surface, because holy shit, there's so much music being released every week. So with that in mind, please tell me, what other albums did I miss? What other albums should I listen to, or potentially even talk about in the near future? Let me know in the comments below, please and thank you. Let me know on Discord as well. You can join us on Discord. There's a link in the description of this video. You can also subscribe for more updates and press these buttons for more cool videos. And also, you can have yourself a fantastic fucking day.